and 37 self-contained one-bed student rooms. At the rear, on the upper floors, a vehicle drop-off zone, a disabled car parking space, cycle parking and associated landscaping. The site is located on the south side of Mill Road, immediately east of the junction with Coleridge Road to the south and Hemmingford Road to the north. The site has an active frontage onto both Mill Road and Coleridge Road. Immediately south of the site is Ruth Bagnall Court, a four-storey apartment building. The ground level rises from north to south across the site. Romsey Labour Club is a building of local interest within the Mill Road Conservation Area. The application has come about after pre-application advice regarding the previous scheme, which was refused by Planning Committee in July 2017. The two reasons for refusal regarded the loss of daylight and outlook to the north-facing single-aspect habitable rooms in apartments in Ruth Bagnall Court, and the internal courtyard was considered inadequate in size, both in size and quality, for both students and users of the nursery. This is an aerial view of the Romsey Labour Club. I will show you the surrounding neighbours. So, beside the site you'll see 276 Mill Road. Then to the rear you have Ruth Bagnall Court, the impact of which formed one of the previous reasons for refusal of this scheme. To that side you'll see the language school at Romsey House. Malta Road is a little further away from the site. Across the road there's 233 and 235 Mill Road, and then you'll have the Romsey Mill just directly across the road. So these pictures show the site as currently viewed from Mill Road and the junction with Coleridge Road. As stated, these buildings are designated a BLI, but please note that it is officer opinion that they are currently in a state of disrepair. These pictures show the rear of the Labour Club, which has been heavily altered. Originally, the principal central section of the building contained a private members' club, which was sui generis. Until recently, the central area of the building was used by the Arthur Rank Hospice as a second-hand furniture store, Class A1. This shop has recently been closed. The eastern wing is currently occupied by the Tsunami Fight Club. It's this side, a gym, and the western side is occupied by Trumpington Boxing Club, which is also a gym. This is the site plan of the refused scheme. One of the reasons for refusal was the courtyard was not sufficient in quality and size for the 40 student occupants and the 24 0 to 2-year-olds using the nursery. The amenity space of the nursery was not considered of sufficient quality, as the majority of the space was enclosed and overshadowed by an overhang and the boundary wall. The relationship between the four-storey Coleridge block and the single-aspect apartments of Ruth Bagnall Court also formed the other reason for refusal. So I'll just bring you through the refused scheme. So that was the depth of the courtyard, that's the width, and that was the nursery scheme. As you can see, this whole area here was overhung by development previously, and this boundary fence in between also overshadowed this space. So you can see the areas of space in that internal courtyard. So the student accommodation had 204 metres squared, and the nursery unit at 47 metres square. This is the proposed site plan, which has been amended to increase the quantity and quality of amenity space. The internal courtyard, not including the additional 6 balconies, is 32 square metres larger, or 13% than the refused scheme. Please also note this communal amenity area would be for 37 students rather than 40. In my report, you will see these figures compare favourably with other nearby committed student schemes. The amenity space for the nursery is nearly 38 square metres larger, or 45% larger than the refused scheme. This is much larger. The Cambridge County Council Growth and Development Team advised that the external space is compliant with Ofsted guidance for 24 children of 0 to 2 age group, and it is acceptable for their needs. I also note that Pat Cake, the potential future user, are also satisfied with this space provision. So, just bringing you through, like I did with the previous refuse site plan, you'll see that it's slightly wider and much wider at the rear, where there's been a cutout of the building. You'll also note that the nursery wall, which used to be around this location, has now been brought further into the courtyard space and slightly angled. So therefore the overhang here doesn't have as much of an impact on the quality of the amenity space for those 0 to 2 year olds. The depth is similar. And that's bringing you through those figures that I've just explained. Now, the entrances. So the entrances are very similar to the previous application. There's 3 entrances into the nursery and 1 main entrance into the student accommodation. You'll notice that it has a lot of visitor parking as well. 14 visitor cycle spaces are proposed. The other change between that of this and the review scheme is a designated disabled space has been added to this scheme, which is an improvement. So this is the this is the refused scheme, as you'll see. On the board there for a second. And you can see as well the existing basements are slightly outlined of the Labour Club as it is now. This is the proposed scheme, and you'll see similarly to the previous application, the main cycle storage for the student use is in the basement. There are 48 cycle spaces proposed, complies with guidance. The ramp location has changed, so now the ramp is more gradual in ascent and descent, and the amount of student accommodation is the same provided on this floor, but again you'll see that put away. So highlighted in red are the areas that were included in the previous scheme that have now been removed by this scheme, and the area in blue, bringing this block next to 276 Mill Road, the whole way to the end of the site has been added. So this is the refused scheme again. This is the proposed. And again, these are the areas that have been reduced. You'll note that there has been much more of a cutback in this the Coleridge Road block facing Ruth Bagnall Court, so that has been informed by the sunlight daylight assessment, so that the apartments now facing this proposal are considered acceptable under BRE guidance. You'll also notice that the 2 metre setback from the front facade of the DLI is maintained by this proposal, like it was by the previous proposal. This is the refused third floor. And this is the proposed third floor and roof. And again, you'll notice how much this block has been scaled back in bulk to get over that impact and that reason for refusal of the previous scheme, which did not have favourable BRE results for the habitable rooms facing onto this block here. So this is the refused and the proposed. No changes to what has previously been refused. Please note there are several recommended conditions regarding detailing and materials sought. Conservation and urban design support the retention of the DLI facade and the design approach by the agent. And the planning committee did not find this approach a reason for refusal previously. So this is the refused Coleridge Road elevation, and you can see the whole block there is 4 stories tall. This is the proposed Coleridge Road block, and you'll see there the area that's being removed. Regarding design, conservation and urban design support the Coleridge Road block and consider the use of indentation and different brick colours and balconies all help to break up its form and add visual interest. Amendments have added a zinc-clad mansard roof to the 3rd floor. That's this element here, which in officer opinion gives the building a more subservient form and an acceptable impact on the character of the conservation area. The proposed 2.6 metre gap between the Coleridge Road block and Mill Road blocks at 2nd and 3rd floor is considered acceptable and emphasises the 2 separate blocks, and therefore gives the block this Coleridge Road block an acceptable impact on the DLI. So this is the rear elevations. So this is the refused scheme, the proposed, and you will see the elements in red are the elements that have been removed between the 2 schemes. Refused sections, proposed sections, and you will see that this element again has been removed and this element has been added. And this is looking from 276 Mill Road. So you will see the existing elevation next to 276 Mill Road goes along here, goes up here to 3 stories, from 2 to 3 stories, and then goes here down here to just a boundary fence. The previous refused scheme had 2 stories the whole way along, and the proposed scheme does the same, but it does infill this slight area here. From daylight sunlight assessments provided by the applicant, it is found that the impact on this neighbour is acceptable and very similar to, if not an improvement to, the impact that's there at the moment. So the impact on roof Bagnall Court. So I've already kind of gone through this, but it's these 2 main apartments which form the main reason for refusal. This 1st floor apartment here, and this ground floor apartment behind this service shed here. Both are single aspect, north facing apartments, both are studio apartments, and both would have been impacted by the proposal significantly previously. They now meet the 80% guidance under DRE and have an acceptable impact in terms of daylight. And that's just the side elevation of Roof Bagnall Court there. It was those two apartments there that were mainly impacted by the previous proposal.
Rob, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you think you could speed up your report?
No problem. So just to go through it very quickly, this is 276, the property adjoining what's at the moment the Sunam Gym. As you can see, the wing to the rear goes straight back and has this 3-story element at the moment, and this garden is quite overshadowed at the moment. The proposal would be 2-story the full way back to the rear. This is Sedley Court. I put this in my presentation because this is Patrick the end user of the nursery. This is their current home and ground floor. The upper floor on this development are all student accommodation, and having visited that site, I thought that the interaction between the two uses was acceptable. All of the bedroom windows of the student accommodation overlook Patrick Cake's amenity space, and there hasn't been any issues. Patrick Cake would move their 0 to 2-year-old unit from this area to this Mill Road area as part of this application, and the nursery has been designed with their criteria and Ofsted guidance in mind, and it would free up obviously the 0 to 2 unit here in Sedley Court. So just to go through the CGIs at the end, this is the Coleridge Road block. That's the main change. So you can see the differences there.
Yes, just read it.
Yeah, that's the refused CGI, proposed CGI, and that's my last slide. That's the proposed CGI of the Coleridge Road block.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Andrew Clark, Colin Brown, and Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Do I need to start? This one here. This is a great one. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to make a statement objecting to the proposed development of the Romsey Labour Club. The Council received 102 submissions objecting to the proposed development. Many of these submissions extensive and forceful in their objection. Both Cambridge Past, Present and Future and the Mill Road History Society submitted considered and persuasive objections. A further 60 residents have signed a petition objecting to the proposal. In contrast, the Council received only a single representation in support of the development, and even that was hardly a ringing endorsement. The Council has not received a single submission that unequivocally supports this development. When considering what will be lost and gained if the proposal were to be approved, it is clear that the losses would be hugely significant and the gains comparatively marginal. The Romsey Labour Club was built by and for its members in the 1920s, and the unique facade remains an important part of Cambridge's social history. This history of working class Cambridge is of course different to much of what else is preserved in the city. Today, the buildings house the unique Tsunami Gym and Boxing Club, which provide recreational facilities used by over 200 local people of diverse ages, backgrounds and abilities. The Labour Club is a building of local interest, with the Council clear that, quote, proposals should pay special attention to preserving features that contribute to the character, maintaining proportions, and that alterations should be carried out in a sympathetic manner. End quote. If the development were to go ahead, 3 stories of commercial, profit-led construction would rise behind the brick facade and would symbolise much of what the original Labour Club opposed. Rather than being sympathetic to the existing facade, the development would architecturally hold it in contempt. It is an egregious example of facadism. The proposed student housing and day nursery provide comparatively little for the local community. The flats are an example of generic unplanned student housing that is creeping across the city. These cramped homes do nothing to foster a sense of community. with no shared internal space proposed. The planning officer's opinion that, quote, the harm associated with the loss of these two small specialist gyms is outweighed by the public benefit of the proposed nursery, end quote, is simply not supported by the evidence. The exclusive nursery would cater for a mere 24 children from ages 0 to 2. The nursery would also duplicate to an extent services available nearby. In summary, the proposed development is not wanted by the local community, would effectively destroy a building of deep historical significance, would cause the loss of recreational facilities for the community, and is contrary to both the local plan and the emerging local plan. For these reasons, I would suggest that the proper course of action is for the committee to refuse the proposal.
Thank you very much indeed. Colin Brown, you are the agent.
Thank you, Chair. We're pleased to have received a favourable recommendation from your officers, and I'm grateful to them for the work that they have carried out in negotiating the scheme relative to that refusal committee in July of last year. The approach that we have taken, as is reflected in the committee report and indeed Rob's presentation, is to have sought to have addressed the specific reasons for refusal that were given at the time. That I would submit as the correct approach, and that is what the committee should be mindful of. This has been done in a number of ways. The College Road block has been stepped down from 4 to 2 stories at its southern end where it adjoins Ruth Bagnall Court. A step is also provided within the southern elevation, ensuring that the block will not result in any unacceptable enclosure or loss of light towards the windows within the northern elevation of Ruth Bagnall Court. The BRE assessment has been prepared and submitted, and it shows that the windows are now entirely compliant with that guidance. Previously, as you will have seen, the block extended to a full 4 stories. We therefore consider that the first refusal reason has been addressed. Central courtyard space has been enlarged. It is now much more usable. It has been increased in size through the introduction of the break in the southern elevation, or the chamfer, and by the reorientation of the units within the eastern wing. Student space is now more usable, extends to about 236 square metres, which is 6.4 square metres per student, which is generous in comparison to a number of schemes in the city. Members may wish to look at the table under paragraph 8.59 of the report, which provides a comparison. There is also exterior threshold space for ground floor units. The amenity space for the nursery has been nearly doubled in size. Again, it is far more usable. And Rob has confirmed the majority of this space is also now uncovered, which was a concern raised previously, so there will be plenty of daylight penetrating into that space. The scheme is supported by all statutory consultees, including conservation officers, urban design officers, landscaping, highways and planning policy, who have confirmed that the principle of the development in all its guises is acceptable. Ground floor now functions better than previously proposed. Entrances are more legible. We have additional cycle parking for the nursery use, including dedicated space for cargo cycles. Drop-off lay-by will still remain, but we have provided the additional disabled car parking bay, which was a point raised specifically by members previously. Reduction obviously in the student units from 40 to 37, and we've simplified the materials palette with the roof material on College Road now being the same as that proposed on Mill Road. The BLI frontage on Mill Road and the college return will be retained as part of the proposals. We do hope in summary you can support the scheme. It fully addresses your previous reasons for refusal, and we feel you should now be able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin. Councillor Bajan.
Thank you, Chair. People will note that today I'm wearing my best suit. I don't normally wear a suit, but I'm doing this out of respect to the people who built Romsey Labour Club. They, if they were attending this meeting, would be wearing a suit. Those working class people who with their own hands and their own money built this club. And this is not just a piece of theatrical. This is about the reality of attacking and overcoming and overwhelming a Labour club that is a part of the history of Romsey as we know it. I hope the committee will bear with me as I have been thinking on my feet since the Conservation Officer's report in the earlier application, where he spoke about the balance between material factors and the public good on Mill Road Depot. And this is completely contrary to the advice given on this site. Completely contrary, and I hope the Conservation Officer will talk to that subject. My submission is not simply about building more student flats in Romsey, although after the hundreds that have been built, it is part of it. As an indicator of that, I would point to what McLaren, just 100 yards down the road, did when they built 340 student flats on land designated for houses that will soon become ready for occupation. I would also point to the Royal Standard and its student flats and how that was controversial and was only successful by one vote on this planning committee about 4 years ago. There are also the many houses in Romsey that have been changed into HMOs for students. This has made a material difference to the balance of the area. And again, this is another tipping point for more student flats in an area that doesn't need student flats but needs housing. I'll now move to my main arguments about the right of developers to bury Romsey Labour Club in a sarcophagus of student flats. This is how it looked. You've all got this picture. This is how it looked. It's a single-storey building of great significance, great historical value. And this is what they're going to do with it. And the conservation officer says in their report that this doesn't make any difference. It's got to be a balance of public good. How much public good is there in building more student flats on Mill Road? How much public good is there in destroying a building that will never again be as it stands today? I know it's in disrepair, but that doesn't mean that you destroy something because it's in disrepair. The planners and the people that own this site should be working to preserve this site and build their flats at the back. Everybody seems to be worried about the flats behind the site, which are of no significance and outside of the conservation area. This is the first building in the conservation area as you come off of Coleridge Road. So therefore it is a key site. It may not be King's College Chapel, but Romsey Labour Club is a monument to the working class history and is at the soul of what Romsey, this area of Cambridge, actually is. Let me move to more material factors. So on the first slide, where you drop down on the scene, there are 4 significant buildings on the Coleridge Road, Mill Road junction. The next slide. No. That one. On the left, you've got Romsey House, which is a significant Victorian building. Opposite, you have 2-storey Victorian houses. On the other corner, you've got Romsey Mill, and then you've got Romsey Labour Club, a single-storey building. This is a Victorian corner in Romsey. Without features such as this, Romsey would probably never have been declared a conservation area. And now we're in a situation where people are trying to cover it with student flats. You could stand there in the dusk and look at that, and you could be there 100 years ago if it wasn't for the traffic roaring past. You can put yourself back, you can see how that looked 100 years ago. Perhaps it was a different officer that pointed out about the weight of public good, who spoke on this site to build 4-storey buildings is okay, and then when we look at the Mill Road depot, we almost come to a point of turning down that application because there were 4-storey buildings built on that.
Councillor Bagent,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'm sure.
First of all, I think, although as a councillor you are entitled to take your time, I think you are taking, if I may say so, an inordinate amount of time. Secondly, you are not addressing the questions which this application refers to, which is the 2 changes, the 2 reasons for refusal that were advanced with respect to the original application. We simply cannot allow this committee to wander into areas which have already been resolved in that they were not raised as questions for refusal in a previous application. So I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think you're way off target here, and I would advise you to bring your remarks to a close.
Chair, they've changed the shape of the building. Everything comes up for grabs at that point. They've changed the shape of the building, they've changed the look of the building. It's not the same. So therefore everything is up for grabs. And there were complaints made about the front of the building at the previous meeting.
Yes, but can you confine your remarks to the effect, the impact of those changes?
No. If you're going to stop me talking, because the whole site has changed in its look and its outlook. And we have contrary advice given to this committee by a conservation officer to the advice that's given on this application.
Okay, well, I'm not telling you that your time has run out, but I'm going to ask Rebecca Williams if she will kindly intervene here at this stage about the extent of the allowable discussion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just clarify the point about what's under discussion here. Obviously, the application you have before you has to be considered afresh. This is a new application. However, as the Chair says, the reasons for refusal last time are the central focus of the new application, what it seeks to address. Members must be very careful that something that was acceptable last time and was not a reason for refusal cannot suddenly become a reason for refusal unless something material has changed. And I would ask you to keep that in mind.
Chair, I accept that something material has changed. The view of the Conservation Officer in the previous report on Mill Road Depot is entirely at odds to the view of the Conservation Officer on this report. But can I continue? I'll be as quick as I can.
You do, please, but I do urge you to bring your remarks to a close and to be very mindful of the fact that if you go, well, please bring your remarks to a close.
Thank you. Built here are not flats that will be acceptable to places like Anglia Ruskin University, and there is an emerging policy, section 46, that would not have allowed this had it been agreed. And I think that is significant, so I'm going to keep moving. I'm concluding here now. The images presented by the developer are designed to deny the reality. This is a busy Victorian corner on a busy main road, and not some leafy out-of-town development. The application seeks to destroy this reality. To use your own words an hour ago, this building is irreplaceable and is a totem of what Romsey is. It's a totemic building. The Romsey Labour Club may have fallen into disrepair, but once it's gone, it's gone. It's as much a part of Cambridge's history as other iconic buildings. I'm asking members to really reconsider their views. You are here not as planning officers, but as people with an element of subjectivity, and you're allowed to change your mind from what you thought was right to what you might think is not right. In fact, this committee could have changed in total to the previous committee, although it hasn't at this moment. I'm just asking for a refusal. And I think
Thank you very much.